Making a judgment call. Is it ever called for? Welcome back. I'm Gila Ross, host of the Power Up podcast, where we share short, relatable ideas that upgrade and impact our everyday lives. And in this episode, together with the Wednesday night discussion group, we look at our judgment, our perception, and we look at Sarah and Hagar and how their approach to making judgment calls can teach us about how and when and where to make our judgment calls and to make them worthwhile. Is there a time or a place to judge other people? What does anyone think? Come on, you guys must have opinions. I
think no, because you don't know what someone's going through.
All right, so Maddie's saying no. And for is there a time or a place to judge other people? So Maddie and Joe are saying no. Ooh, Jem is saying if someone is in danger.
1 point. I think everyone judge people in those way. Yeah, going for a job interview, you judge.
I think we're entitled to judge people from Holocaust and things like that. So actually, in some ways, I think we are entitled to judge, because I think with the Holocaust or something like that, there's a moral ground to do it.
What do you mean? What do you mean by judging people from the Holocaust? Judging what? Let's say?
As in the Nazis, as in the soldiers, right. As in the army, as in the people who helped, the people who didn't help. You know, I think there is a judgment that most people would agree with.
I mean, I'm going to open it up to everyone else, but I think, look, it's we may want to say like never, and you know that we shouldn't judge people as a lot, and there's very valid reasons for not judging. But I think when you hear what Gail is saying, like, who around here hasn't judged Hitler?
It's what you do when you judge. It's not just talking about Hitler, when she's talking about people who didn't help and stuff.
Right. Okay. Which is okay. I was using the extreme, but you know, if you hear the stories about like the people that the Nazis, or if you've ever read a Holocaust book and you read about the Nazis, you have a judgment about the people that were either helping or either helping the Nazi movement or not helping. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, especially on the Poland trip, and you hear about the story, absolutely.
Okay, so has anyone's opinion changed now?
But it's what you do with that judgment.
What do you mean by that?
So, like, if someone does something, and then you can have a judgment of how you feel, and it's about what you do with that. Like whether you go around saying to other people, "Oh, like this person is doing that person," that's whether.
Interesting. Yeah, what you do with it. That's a very good point. Rachel, hold on to that point, because we're gonna come back to it later. What were you gonna say, Esther?
That's an opinion.
What's an opinion? Rachel, it's an opinion. Well, you mean
you can have an opinion on a matter. Is that judging someone?
I think so. I think an opinion is a judgment. No.
Well, we all have opinions on everything.
Well, not necessarily all of us. Some of us definitely have opinions on everything, right? I just want to put a disclaimer. Not everyone has an opinion about. I hear that, and you could even argue that it's human nature to have an opinion, right? And if you know, it is. Like it's very like you hear something or you see something. It's very human nature. I don't know what the correct lingo for saying that is, but it's very natural. Yes, that's the word. Thank you, Joe. I knew I needed you here. Well, for many reasons. To have that opinion. Okay, I want to tell you 3 stories that are that I think are going to give us a little bit of insight into this, because I think we have kind of 2 opinions. We have the opinion, we actually have 3 opinions. We have the opinion, number 1, that we shouldn't judge other people because we don't know what other people are going through. We don't know, we don't really know what the full story is, right? So we should not judge other people. I think that's something that most of us can get behind most of the time, right? Maybe not in the heat of the moment, but maybe when things have calmed down and whatever. Is that something we can get behind?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. Then there's a second opinion that when you hear certain things, we instinctively form an opinion, which is usually a judgment, right? You know, when you have an opinion that the Nazis were terrible, you are making a judgment on the Nazis, correct? So these are two opinions. Okay, now we're going to find out. We're going to look at 3 different stories and then see where we can take those 2 opinions. Okay, so there's 3 stories that are written up in the Torah quite close consecutively. And interestingly enough, whenever in the Torah there's different stories written together, they usually there's a message within the way that it's written. There's many different levels of understanding of the Torah and many different things that we can learn from it. So the first story is that Abraham and Sarah were married, and Sarah could not have a child, right? She couldn't get pregnant. So she tells her husband, Abraham, go and marry my maidservant, Hagar, and hopefully you'll have, Hagar will become pregnant and at least you will have a child. So so Abraham and Hagar get married, and Hagar falls pregnant right away. And the Torah says a very interesting thing. It says that she became pregnant, she saw that she was pregnant, and Sarah's esteem, her respect for Sarah was lowered in her eyes. Now, let me ask you the question. Why do you think her getting pregnant would suddenly make her have less respect for Sarah?
She had some snowden.
Okay.
She allowed her husband. She wanted stuff in seconds.
Sorry?
She was happy to, marry him and have children with him, even though he was essentially married to someone else. I feel like that she obviously had low standards, I think, in a way.
So in those times,
That's what I mean. That's why she lost respect, because she realised that she actually accepted this and she did it.
So you're saying so in theory it's a good theory. The only challenge is, hi Bev, is that she lost respect after she got pregnant, not after the marriage. It was
realisation that hit a nerve. I don't know.
Right. So the question is, you're right, but what? No,
Hagar
Hagar lost respect for Sarah. So what was it about her finding out that she was pregnant that made her lose respect for Sarah?
Maybe she thought she was better.
Right, because what did she think in her head? And this is kind of her thought process, that Abraham and Sarah and Hagar got married, and Hagar got pregnant right afterwards from the very first union. And she thought in her mind, she made a judgment in her mind. She said to her, I got pregnant. Sarah's been married for years and years and years, and she is unable to get pregnant. Therefore, it means that Sarah is not as righteous as she seems, right? She made a judgment in her head. She said, if Sarah was as righteous as she makes out to be, then God would have given her a child, right? The fact that God is not making her pregnant, is not giving her a child, then that means that she's not on the inside what she is on the outside. Now, we live in a different society, right, where we understand that hopefully we don't make those sort of judgments, right? We hopefully don't look at someone who who does have children, someone doesn't have children, and say, oh, that person is better than the other. But let's dial it back to our own lives, because I think we do make those judgments, right? Like sometimes you see someone who is struggling in business, right? Or you see someone who is successful in business, and you think to yourself, if that person who's struggling in business just got up a little bit earlier in the morning or worked a little bit harder, they wouldn't struggle as much. Or something that comes up a lot is like the fitness industry, right? The messaging that they tell everyone is that if you worked harder, you could look like this, right? So again, the reason why I'm bringing these ideas up is because I think I want us to try and relate to what was going on there, right? And I think if we can relate, can anyone here around the table or around the virtual table relate to this concept of hearing someone else's fortune or misfortune and making a judgment call based on it?
I think we're all doing it all the time.
It's schadenfreude. That's what it is, isn't it? Basically.
Is
The way you basically like schadenfreude is where basically you get joy in someone else's
Yes. Yeah, if you feel that like someone else who you don't really want to be successful and you see them like trip up and you're like, yes, exactly. But so we can relate a little bit to, even though Hagar's realm of judgment was in a different area, and I don't think any of us nowadays would kind of feel that judgment in the same way as we did, as they did that, she did then. But we can relate to the concept of seeing someone's fortune or misfortune and making the judgment call on it. Now, Rachel's point of what we do with that judgment call, hopefully we're sophisticated enough not to do anything with it, right? Not to go over to them and say, haha, you know, the reason why you're not successful is because you're just lazy or whatever it is, right? Hopefully we're not doing that. But sometimes it could flip through our mind. Let's keep that story number one in our mind. Okay, now let's flip to story number two. Story number two is Sarah finally gets pregnant. She has a son, Isaac. And Hagar has her son, which is Ishmael. And Sarah is watching the boys, and the boys are growing up together, and she notices something. She notices that Ishmael is a bad influence on Isaac. And she sees their behavior. She makes a judgment that he's a bad influence. And she goes to Abraham and says, you know what? Ishmael is a bad influence on Isaac. You got to send him away. And Abraham says, it's my kid. I'm not sending my kid away. What happens next? Does anyone know what happens next? Right, but the step beforehand? Sorry? No. Just in this story, anyone knows? This is very cool. What happens next? So Abraham's they have a disagreement, marital disharmony, right? They have a disagreement, and God intervenes, right? You have to press the red button down.
No, she got that bit.
Oh, okay. Is it no water in it? Oh, okay, fine. We'll get water soon. Okay, so sorry. 1 minute. Where were we up to? Okay, so God intervenes, and God said, "Oh, thank you, Lisa." God tells Abraham, "Listen to your wife because she is right." Right? God intervenes and tells Abraham, "You got to listen to your wife and send Ishmael away because she is right." So, why was she right? She noticed that Ishmael was a negative influence on Isaac. Okay, now what's the difference between the two stories? Like, you have story number one, which is Hagar. She sees, she makes a judgment. You have story number two, which is Sarah. She sees something, she makes a judgment. Why is one correct and one incorrect?
One is for somebody else.
What do you mean by that, Gail?
One was for the good of her child. The other one was for her own good.
Okay, so you got the first part of that correct, that Sarah's judgment, you could almost say she had to make that judgment because it's her responsibility to raise her child.
So the first story, somebody's getting happiness and misfortune, whereas the other one is actually you're trying to make sure you're bad influence.
So, Sarah, you're all 100% right. Right, you're all 100% right. Now, in story number two, she's judging to make an action, right? Her responsibility is to care for her child and to raise her child. She sees something that she recognizes is a negative influence on her child. And as a parent, it is our responsibility to make sure that our children are protected from negative influences as much as we can, right? If you think about it, if you knew that your child had a friend that was a negative influence on them, would you encourage that friendship? Never, right? It's our responsibility as a parent. Why was Hagar's judgment? What was the difference there?
She was making herself feel better. It was an internal thing.
It was an internal thing. She didn't need to make a judgment. There was no plan. There was nothing she was going to do different because of that.
Was there an issue with their marriage? Was it as equal as Abraham and Sarah? Were they equal compared to Hagar and Abraham? Was there a threat? Is there a threat there?
I would venture to guess probably, because that's the nature of a husband who has two wives, that there's going to be friction. But the interesting thing is that she only lost respect after she got pregnant. It was nothing to do with the marriage. It was to do with the fact that I'm pregnant and she's not. And I think this is the distinction, right? That we know our judgment is limited, right? We know that as Maddie and I can't remember who, apologies to the person it was, we're limited, I'm limited too, our judgment is limited, right? Nevertheless, does that mean we say, don't judge? No, we're human beings. God gave us that judgment. Why? Because there are times we have to take action, right? We have to take action based on the information, the best information we have. But hold on to that for a second. So now we've got two stories that we're holding on. I'm going to throw in a third story. So Ishmael gets sent away. Hagar and Ishmael leave. They go to the desert and they run out of water. Ishmael is thirsty and he's dehydrated and he's ill. And Hagar looks at her child. She realizes she has no water, nothing, and she realizes lost cause. Right? There's nothing I could do for this child. You know, he's going to die. So what does she do? And try and relate to it as a parent, right? She looks at her child and she's like, he's gonna die. I can't watch it. It's too painful for me. She puts him under a bush and she walks away from him. Well, talking about judgment, right? So yes, do you want to?
Sometimes you can say you can't judge until you've been in someone's situation.
Right, you can't. But Gemma, why was there a bit of a judgment there?
I'm saying to think of it as a mother, so I feel like she thinks they're guaranteed to die, but again, not in that situation, thank God, but I don't know, like...
What bothers you about it on a very simple question?
How can you
leave your kid? Exactly, how can you leave your kid?
But maybe she couldn't bear to see him.
For selfish reasons, though, didn't she? She didn't think of him in that time.
Yeah, whatever, let's not get into it, but I think...
Then...
Okay, so Bomni, you want to hear the rest of the story? You want to hear the rest of the story? Because this is very, very, very cool, the rest of the story. So he's left under a bush. He's been kicked out of his house by his dad. His mother has left him to die. What does this guy do? And he was not a good person. Wait. There's a little thing. He cries out to God, right? This is Ishmael was not a good person at this point, but he is in the pits of despair, completely abandoned by his parents. If you can imagine what it feels like, cries out to God and says, I am completely sorry. I am a changed person. And God wants to listen to him and save his life. But the angels go to God and they say, no, this guy is going to, as Charlotte told us, is going to found Islam. This guy is going to be irresponsible for so much suffering for the Jewish people. How can you save him? What would you say if you were God at that point? Come on, this is your opportunity to play God.
Everyone is one of my creatures.
Yes, okay, but we know God knows that he's going to mess up. God knows that he's going to be the cause of so much suffering.
Free choice.
Can I just ask something really, really random?
Let's I want to hear it, but hold on for it. Okay, so what does God say? God says to the angels, you are correct. You are correct. He was bad. He will be terrible. But right now, he is a person who is not just suffering, who is repenting, right? He is sincere in his repentance, and God says, I judge him not for who he was and not for who he will be, but for where he is right now. The verse in the Torah actually says that, and God heard him where he was, right? God says, you're right. He was terrible. He will be terrible, right? This is not a situation where God didn't know that he was going to mess up again. God knew he was going to mess up again. He says, but there is justice, and that justice means that I'm going to judge him for who he is right now. And to us as human beings, I would make a very different decision. If I was looking at this, right? If let's say I'm looking at it as a point of view of a parent, and I knew there was a child that was mean to my kid, right? A bully to my kid. And the kid came to me and was completely sorry, sincerely sorry. But I knew in my head that this, and I knew whatever, I had prophecy or whatever, that that this child was going to hurt my child again. I would say no. I don't care. I don't care how sorry you are right now. Like I'm not. And am I?
I'd be like, I forgive you, but don't ever come to
But yeah, but
don't
don't
ever come to my stuff.
yeah, don't
Yeah.
I'm cutting off
Exactly
things,
what-
right?
that's what you're
But
saying,
the reality is that
Yeah.
by God saving his life, that meant that he was going to have descendants, and those descendants were going to persecute the Jews, right? So what we see so far from here is that there's a difference between God's perception and judgment, and there's a difference between human perception and judgment. What's the difference?
So can you just go back to the point, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
Why does God decide to do certain actions to certain people? For example, Lot's wife, whatever she did, got turned into a pillar of salt. She's never named either, is she? She's not even worth anything. She's got no name.
Right, I don't think
Why
so.
did he decide to turn her into salt, but not other people?
She never repented.
So it's literally the here and now.
It's hold on to the question. I'm gonna get to it. We'll get to it in a minute, right? So what's the difference between our judgment and God's judgment is that our judgment is limited, right? Back to what Maddie and whoever it was, apologies to whoever it was it you, Abby? Joe, sorry, Maddie and Joe that said it right in the beginning. And there were people on Instagram that also said it right in the beginning. You can't judge other people because you don't know the whole story, right? God knows everything, right? God knows who we were. God knows who we are right now. God knows our struggles. God knows everyone else's struggles as well. God knows everything, right? Does that mean that we can't ever judge other people? No, because there are times in our lives that we have to take action based on our judgments, right? You have to make a judgment on which school your kids go to. You have to make a judgment on who you let into your life. You have to make a judgment on all sorts of different things, right? But we have to understand that we're making the judgment based on our limited perception, right? So that means if there's a situation where, someone like Sarah and Hagar didn't have to do anything, right? There was no reason, there was no constructive purpose for her judgment. When it comes to a place like that, when you're just looking at someone else and you're thinking, that would never be me, right? That's not a place to be a judgment. But when it's a time to take action, you have to take the limited information that we have and do the best we can make the best decision we can under those circumstances. But we have to know that our understanding and our judgment is limited, right? But there's also another amazing idea that comes out of that, is that when God judges, he judges the entire thing, right? And sometimes we look at that as though it's a scary thing, right? Especially, I think, I've heard this question come up over the high holidays as well. Like, I'm coming into Rosh Hashanah, I'm coming into Yom Kippur, I'm going to tell God, I'm sorry for X, Y, Z. Like, who am I kidding? I know I'm going to mess up again. God knows I'm going to mess up again. Probably my friends also know I'm going to mess up again, right? Like, what is it? And it can be disheartening, or forget about it. It could even be now, right? You're inspired. You want to take action. You want to say, you know what? Whatever, this class was amazing, and I want to do something different because of it. And then you think to yourself, but like, I'm going to mess up. But this is this thing, what Yishmael is taught us is that we get judged for who we are right now, right? So who he was, yes, we have to learn from it, and we have to make amends and all that, and that's a whole different discussion. And who we will be, that's also a different discussion. But when God judges us, he looks at who we are right now. So if right now I am sincere in my desire to connect to God, or to do anything a little bit different or a little bit better, that counts. So that's a couple of, I think, really incredible things that we hear from this is sort of the picture that we get about our limited judgment, which we have to take sometimes with the understanding that our judgment is limited, and God's complete judgment, right, which is based on the entirety of who we are and where we are right now. We can never underestimate the power of our sincere desire if we are in the moment. I'm going to open it up to questions. Charlotte, you had a...
No, that was the question. The question was, you kind of answered it, but basically, why does God make a certain decision to act in a certain way?
Right.
So why he turned someone into a pillar of salt, but actually made the decision to forgive someone else? Yeah.
So does anyone want to answer the question? It's God takes the entirety of the picture, right? The person, their struggles, right? For some people, we may look at two people and we look at one as a success and one as a failure, And we may get it wrong because we don't know what their internal struggles are. So God looks at the entire picture and also where they are right now. What is their intention? What is their desire right now?
Thank you for taking the time to listen. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can get in touch with me. I'm on Instagram at itsgilaross. And please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful day.